Eerst niet veel.
I'm standing in my childhood bedroom, and while it's changed a lot since I've been here because grandchildren inherited the room afterwards, it still is my room. And right here behind me is where, back in the early 1980s, the Dracula poster would have hung. So what is the value of nostalgia? It's an interesting question because I spent a lot of time on this channel talking about how nostalgia can cloud our vision and take our focus away from the things that are happening right now in the horror genre that really deserve a lot more attention. Meanwhile, a new Texas Chainsaw Massacre or a new Halloween film gets all the air in the room, and I think there's something lost in that equation. The great films of the past that we cherish weren't really just recycled from something else. They were those creative first attempts. Night of the Living Dead was a broad departure from the zombie films of the past, which focused on voodoo. And I think that we've forgotten just how much it's important that we embrace the new. So with that in mind, it's important for me to say that we're all victims of nostalgia. As we grow older, the things from our youth become enshrined in our lives. They inherit a worthiness or a value that they probably didn't even have when we were young and didn't fully appreciate them. The things we surrounded ourselves with were, frankly, the window dressing of our lives. But now, that window dressing is a lot more attractive than it's ever been. And the reason for that is pretty simple. When you get to the point where you realize you have more years behind you than ahead, you evaluate what you really find important, what's made you happy, what's made this life worthwhile. There's a lot in life that's not pleasant, and to focus too much on those things leads us exactly to a horrible, empty, mindless, useless death. So when we surround ourselves with stuff from our youth, what we're doing is we're trying to hold on to that vitality and hopefully end up with a life that feels worthwhile. Searching for meaning in horror films might be a folly, but it's a folly that has made my life feel good and worthwhile. And every time I talk to another fan, I reinforce that concept because I see the value in their face and in their words and in their eyes. It makes me not feel quite as alone in my love of what really are pretty unimportant things, right? There's nothing about a horror movie or a horror novel or a great gothic song that is essential to life. And yet, I wouldn't trade any of those great memories of watching horror movies on UHF television or those early trips to the theater or cracking open those used paperbacks for the first time and reading those classic openings from Shirley Jackson and H.P. Lovecraft. I wouldn't trade them. They're important. They're a core to who I am. So this brings us somehow to a poster of Dracula. So when I was a kid, I had very little choice of things horror-related that I could buy and really decorate my room with. In fact, there was so little of it that the fact of the matter is I cherished whatever I could get a hold of. So there was a Scholastic book fair, and at the Scholastic book fair, they came around every year in a van. It was called the Bookmobile. And the Bookmobile had a very limited number of things available for kids to purchase, but among those things, there was always usually one thing I could find that I really, really, really loved. Sometimes it was Banicula, which was a kid's book about a vampire bunny rabbit. Sometimes it was just a Mad Libs with a Halloween theme. If the bookmobile happened to come around in fall, that was a good hint that maybe I could do that. Maybe I could find that thing. But just as often, I was just down for whatever they had that was horror-related. And one year, there was posters that were given away free with any book purchase at the bookmobile. And you used to get these little catalogs before the bookmobile would come that would tell us what would be there and how much it cost, so that your parents could give you the few bucks to buy that cheap paperback. And I really didn't care about the book that year, but there was a poster that I wanted desperately. And the posters were limited. There was only so many of them. So if my fellow classmates had decided to pick up the Dracula poster, I was going to miss out. So I was on the edge of my seat all day in class. I couldn't wait for the bookmobile to be there, and then, of course, it to be our turn in my class to go to the bookmobile. Well, I got the poster that day. I don't remember what book I picked up, but I got the poster that day. And that poster went on the wall. The one thing I haven't mentioned yet is that this poster was a 3D drawing of Dracula with a wolf and a vampire bat. And you had to wear red and blue glasses, which they also provided. It all came bagged if you wanted the 3D effect. Now, the 3D effect was not very good, as all anaglyphic 3D is. It's rough, it hurts your eyes after a while, and the image pops, but it pops fuzzy and discolored, right? But this poster was on my wall, and it was one of my cherished horror belongings, one of the first. Probably in my teenage years, it got replaced by maybe a movie poster from a video store or something. I have no idea what actually happened to the original Dracula poster. And I hadn't even thought about it for many years until I had a conversation with a friend. We were talking about things from our youth that we had great nostalgia for. I don't know why at that moment I remembered that poster, but I did. It must have been a part of my life for 10 years, but I hadn't thought about it in probably 15 years. Flash forward a couple years, and the friend had apparently decided to put a keyword search into eBay for Dracula 3D poster. Guess what he sent a link to? I opened up that link and looked at it, and having actually seen the poster after so many years was, oh my God, it was like a blood runs cold revelation. It seemed unreal, impossible, but yet right, 100% correct, right. So I looked at the price tag, which was way too much, especially considering the condition it was in. But this was a giveaway from the very early 1980s. There wasn't any chance of me seeing it again, probably, if I didn't buy it. So I hit the PayPal button. Now, is my life incomplete without a 3D Dracula poster? I wouldn't say incomplete. But you know what? There's some things that have a lot of different values. A poster from the early 80s, sometimes that's as important as just about anything to you. And yeah, it's faded. The 3D effect doesn't work nearly as well as it did even then because the inks are all faded. There's tape marks on it. It's discolored, it's old, it's sun-bleached, and it is glorious. Because as a kid, I had so little I could do or own. There were so many limitations to fandom that don't exist today. There was no, action figures for horror films. I guess the Kenner Alien was out, but who owned that? And it was a $100 toy, too. I mean, there was no way that was happening in my family. But this poster, man, I had that. And I spent hours just staring at that with those cheap cardboard glasses on, figuring out who I was in many ways. I don't know if you have anything in your life that's like this, that anything that has a power that's perhaps greater than the item itself, but reminds you of how you discovered who you were. It's little things. It's a poster that's folded into six and probably was in someone's bottom drawer that they put on eBay thinking, well, if I get any money for it, I'll be lucky. Well, I didn't have one in my drawer. But now, it's got a permanent home on the wall in my office. And that connection to my childhood, my formative years, not just as a horror fan, but just my formative years, well, that's magic to me. Thanks for listening.